Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, coming to you live from Washington, D.C., as always. And as always, we have a really good show for you today, and you're really going to like our guest here. His guy's name is Jim Webb. Actually, is a friend of mine I've known for many years. He used to work here in Washington, D.C. as a Senate aide. He's also a combat Marine vet, which we're going to be talking about here a little bit ago. And most recently, he was a senior foreign policy advisor on the RFK Jr. Presidential campaign, and that's going to figure prominently in our conversation today. But Jim, hey, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on board.
Dan, great to be here. Great to see your face again. It's been a while. We've talked, but it's been a while since I've seen your face. And congratulations on the show.
It has been, and thank you very much. We're really thrilled to the window we're able to provide that. You just don't get much of the mainstream stuff. Lots of truth and some depth that you don't get really anywhere. So at least not many places. So we're thankful for that, and definitely thankful to have you too. The things we want to talk about today, a lot of people have been hearing a lot about RFK Jr. in the news. This Wall Street Journal piece, I think just a couple of days ago, came out and said, look, here's he's got an actual shot at this. They're saying, Gary, if you can throw that that one right there. It says, he isn't Trump or Biden, but is that going to be enough for voters? And obviously he carries all kinds of, credibility just with his family name and all that goes along with that. And I know we'll talk about this in a second, but one of the polls recently, at least it's been published, shows that among the 18 to 34-year-old group, he's actually outpolling Biden and Trump here, which is kind of eye-opening to a lot of people. And I think overall, the last one I saw was that he was potentially 17 points on a national level, which of course is kind of deceptive when you get into the whole, trying to win a presidential campaign and all those kind of things you can talk about too if you want. But the biggest issue here is, as I said at the beginning, is that you were the former advisor on there, but now or not. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit about, actually first, before we talk about why you left, I want to first talk about why you joined it and what is it that it attracted him about you that was different? Because ordinarily, historically, I think since Ross Perot, no third party candidate has even, made any noise at all. But you said, and when we talked the other day, you thought at one point he actually had a shot if things fell in the right place. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Right. And, first and foremost, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to work for his campaign. And I wish them the best of luck. Unfortunately, we had a policy disagreement that I could not stand by. And we went our separate ways. But to go back to what attracted me to the campaign, and I believe what attracts a lot of people to RFK, is that, he's not from the mainstream. He's a different choice, and he has an independent voice on a lot of issues. From jump, what that did is it attracted a large amount of people from across the ideological spectrum, myself included. Right away, there were libertarians, people from the left, people from the right, everybody from in between, people with no political experience, people with a ton of political experience, coming together to try and address, the drift that has happened with this country. And, quite frankly, if you take a look around, not a lot of people are super excited about the choice between President Biden and President Trump, which it looks like it's going to inevitably be. We've kind of been there, done that, and it's mostly
a memory of that.
That you get, but with some discrepancies. And our country is quickly approaching, a crisis point here. If we're not already there. You pick the issue set: foreign policy, domestic policy, the economy. We've had at least 8 years of really fractured leadership, chaos, and people want something different. And my natural inclination, and I believe this is the case for a lot of people out there, is you want somebody from the outside. That was the attractive point for a lot of people, myself included, about Donald Trump. He's not a politician. He's a self-made guy, however you want to cut it. And his presidency was good and bad. Followed by the current president, who is, a formulaic Washington product going back as long as you can remember. Way before he was in Washington, way before I was born.
Yeah. Right.
In context, like I'm looking at TV shows, Sesame Streets, that my daughter, who's 2, watches, that are, they're not nearly as aged as, President Biden's time in office. So, the need for the fresh start is the attractant. And with alternative media, you have all these ideas on the outside, which get discussed every single day. They get discussed on podcasts at the kitchen table, and they never make it into the
mainstream.
Exactly. The
conversation. It doesn't even get in the conversation above the noise here. It's unfortunate. So you were, as the foreign policy guy, that's the area that you was your expertise. And what is this specifically about his foreign policy that you thought was different than either Biden or Trump?
Right. So also, I was the National Veterans Director as well, along with that, but the two tie in together. And he called me in late August, and wanted to know if I wanted to come work for his campaign. And
you were working at the Quincy Institute at that time, right? Here in DC.
Yeah. I had a great job, with lots of great benefits, lots of consistency. A year prior, I worked on a Senate campaign in Missouri, and it's chaos. Anytime you go into a campaign, it's complete and total chaos. And I wanted to make sure that before, I put my family in the middle of that, where we were expecting our second child, and that we married up on the same page, and we talked for, 30, 45 minutes about the issues, about the directions. And, his vision of reducing the empire and, ending the forever wars, bringing our troops home, and using force as, not the first option.
Yeah.
Married up, and also on top of that, it tied directly into, where, like, personally and also anecdotally through conversations with my veteran peers, such as yourself, where veterans fit into society. We've got, a block of veterans who have spent basically the last 20 years at war, and somehow they don't really find themselves included in the conversation about how we make war.
And it's interesting that's the case, because guys like me, guys like you, guys like others that you're talking about here that are in your circle of people are attracted to that kind of view that don't lead with force. It's supposed to be a last resort and all that. The ones who've been there, the ones who fought in a lot of these wars, are the ones who have the first ones to have that view. And there's probably a reason for that. And if politicians would pay a little more attention, I think that they would benefit from it, because there was a study done, I remember, after the 2016 election, that showed in several of the key battleground states, in the areas where they had the highest concentration of veterans and veteran families who had paid the price in wars, went for Trump over Hillary Clinton, who was, at that time kind of advocating that, let's just keep going with more of this kind of stuff. And Trump was saying the opposite of that. And you can make an argument that swung the election in his case. So I think that 100%. There's something here that needs to be untapped.
100%, Daniel. 100%. And that is, it's funny you mentioned that. That's literally the data that I brought with me to the campaign. If you start peeling back the numbers in what they call the high casualty counties, it runs, the Mississippi Valley, from Iowa down into Illinois, and then it arcs all the way up through the Rust Belt. If you Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Western Pennsylvania, and, through the course of the last several election cycles, it's gone back and forth. It was, they called it Obama, Trump, is how these counties went. And it's unequivocally evident that the fact that these normal middle-class Americans who inside of these counties don't necessarily have a history of, people joining the military and retiring. It's, it's a citizen soldier model. They're paying the price. Their kids are not coming home. Yeah. And as a result, it flipped at the ballot box. And what I was hoping would happen is that this would be really tapped into at some point. I've been beating this drum for a couple of years, and I thought we had the guy, and like you're saying, if somebody were to tap into this, it's a huge political class, if you will, that spans every demographic. We don't have to get into it, but every single demographic someone can think of, there are veterans there.
Now, I think that when you and I previously talked about this, your position is that you're talking like nationwide, that there's an untapped potential here that could be mobilized, which no one is mobilizing at all. They, like Trump, took it or benefited from it, but I don't think that was actually a concerted effort to try to do that for that purpose. I haven't seen anyone target that, but you argue that can be tapped into and mobilized in a way that it never has before. Could you elaborate on that a little?
Absolutely. It's like what you just said. When you've been to war, it very quickly becomes a very, very bad idea. I remember my first day in Ramadi. It at the end of it, we came back inside the wire and got mortared, and I went, "Oh Lord, 179 more days of this. What have I done?" And I'm exceptionally proud of my service. Being a Marine, being in the infantry, is a major highlight of my life. I'm still tight with those guys, but the experience itself, it's hell. Like and it's that's not a personal complaint, but every day you're walking, like we were driving through, an absolute blown out city where any point in time you could fall into sewage. There's civilian casualties. You're watching your friends get hit. And it's a high stress pressure cooker. And on the backside of it, naturally, you don't really want to do it anymore. And you have to make sure that, when you're going to war, that it's for the right reasons, that because you end up leaving, and this may sound cliche, but you end up leaving a piece of yourself there. You age quickly, you never forget it. It stays with you. And so I think what comes out of the back end of that is, it's kind of a self-reflection. It's that, we've been through this process and we understand what happens along the way. And then you also want to be able to tell people about that, but, in a sense, like not where you need therapy or you're complaining, to see that represented within society, to put the brakes on, to have a say when we go do these.
Yeah. So just so that it's not just this, whatever it is, fraction of 1% of the population that is always the one that's going out there and doing that, that other people are aware of it so that they understand why, that you should only use force if it's absolutely necessary for our survival, for the defense of our country, ergo the name of Defense Department it used to be, instead of let's throw this, let's go out there first. Let that be the policy option of first choice, not last resort.
Right.
But there's too few people that know that. But now in a minute, I want to get to your specific experience on the ground there, especially in combat around civilians. That'll play in here in just a second. But all of this was underscored and drove you to RFK and led you. And I think you said it was somewhere around the October timeframe. Things seemed to be going in a really good direction because it seemed like he was right on board with all this. And can you pick it up from there?
Absolutely. And it like you said, it was going in the right direction. We had the right people in place. Pardon my daughter in the background there.
Right.
But on following the events in Gaza and Israel on October 7th, there was a bit of a sea change. The campaign decided, or I guess the candidate decided to increasingly unequivocally back the Israeli response in Gaza. And this is not to say that, a nation does not have the right to defend itself, but this gets into proportionality. And one of the things that myself and some other people wanted to do within the campaign was make sure that, we were on the right page, maintaining the consistent rhetoric, and the consistent platform that the campaign had established. And very quickly, it didn't happen. The candidate decided to go a different direction, and doubled and tripled down on the way things were going, within Gaza. And one of the things we started seeing pretty quickly, at least particularly in my vein, I dealt, when I wasn't dealing, with the foreign policy aspect, I was dealing with veterans, mostly combat veterans, on a daily basis. And there were increasing questions about why we're departing, from that line. And, it's people, I think, who have experience in the Middle East, particularly on the ground, understand how all the countries link together, and how, if we have if we're effectively guaranteeing Israeli security, by our presence, which is what it has to be, then we're never fully going to exit from the region, and it's only going to lead to more and more conflicts that we get involved in. And that was, that was kind of it was the genesis of
so, and then from there, it kind of continued to go downhill.
Correct.
And then in late December, things got to a breaking point. And on the 28th of December, or I think it was the 28th, right? It was the 20th. You penned that letter of resignation.
Correct.
And Gary, if you can bring that up on my screen there. I think that the interesting thing that caught my attention in your letter where you explained why you did particular leave is when you wrote, after viewing your comments on the Breaking Points podcast on December 15th, I felt compelled to let you know that your positions on this matter are costing you large amount of support from voters and mine. And 70% of the voters between the ages of 18 and 34 disapprove of Biden's support, which you talked about a second ago there. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to play so people can see what it is about that kind of made you go in that direction, or what it was about him that in the Breaking Point. We pulled a couple of clips out of that very interview. And Gary, let's roll that.
How can you say that Israel is doing everything they can to avoid civilian death when the civilian death toll, even by Israeli estimates, and this is the low, this is the best possible number you could put on it, is 61% innocent civilians, thousands of children, thousands of women. That's worse than the combination of every 20th century conflict combined. So how can you look at that and combine with the complete siege of 2.2 million people and say that they are doing everything they can to protect civilian life?
First of all, what you said is not true. We killed 750,000 civilians in Iraq.
She's talking percentage-wise.
What?
She's talking percentage-wise.
The percentage of the average kill rate in Afghanistan, Mosul, in those battles, in modern warfare is about 8 or 9 to 1. Civilians to military.
And you have a collective punishment of 2.2 million people who are having their access to water, food, fuel, medicine blocked right now by Israel. This also appears to be in violation of the Geneva Conventions. Do you think that it's acceptable to impose a siege on the entire civilian population in Gaza?
If there's a violation, first of all, I don't think that's happening. Let me explain. Second of all, if it violates the Geneva Convention, or if they're deliberately, at any point, anybody is deliberately targeting civilians, they should be prosecuted and they should be jailed and the key should be thrown away. And people say this, but I don't see any proof of that. Right now, that people are deliberately targeting civilians.
But the government announced they were doing a complete siege on the 2.2 million.
Yeah, okay. You're talking about the
siege.
The siege. Now, we did for 10 years. We did collective punishment of Iraq. We actually killed.
I'm not trying to justify that either here.
But why are we just going after the Jews?
Now, as I understand from our previous conversation, that may have been the point that flicked things off for you when he said, we've been collective punishment on the Iraqi civilians. We had killed 750,000 of them. And he said that, not that they had died, but that we killed them.
Correct.
And I wonder if you can tell me what it is about that kind of tweaked you the wrong direction, and why did that make you move out of something that before you thought was something you wanted to be a part of?
Right. And Dan, I think it just speaks for itself, to be honest. You and I both were in combat arms. We're both in Iraq. And we understand how that conflict worked. To delve into my own personal experience for a second, I was in 1st Battalion, 6th Marines in Ramadi from September 2006 through May 2007. And that was the height of the Battle of Ramadi. And what they did in the Battle of Ramadi, which is, they took a lesson from Fallujah, and we deliberately went incrementally through the city to ensure that there was absolutely a minimum of civilian casualties. Civilian considerations were our top priority, because without the support of the population, this is counterinsurgency 101, whether coin works or not is irrelevant, but the first tenet of it is you need the civilians if you're going to succeed. As a result, we had all kinds of restrictions placed on us. I think, and this is back of the napkin math, talking with my friends, trying to figure out, how many airstrikes we called in what was supposed to be 9 months or 7 months, ended up being 9 months because we were part of the surge. And it was probably a half dozen that were cleared. basic infantry weapons were,
Wait. A half dozen airstrikes in that process were cleared, as
Correct.
opposed to the sometimes several hundred in a day that is being used currently in the Gaza Strip. I'm just saying
Absolutely.
the scale seems a little off here.
There's no comparison. There's no comparison. And Ramadi was, I guess, pre-war about 500,000 people. And it was very, very, very densely urban.
That's commensurate with Gaza City in the north.
Absolutely. It's I see the images on TV, and it looks somewhat familiar. You have concrete buildings that are several stories tall, dense alleyways, narrow lines of communication for us to operate on, and it gives every single advantage to the defender. And, the U.S. Marine Corps, in conjunction with, Army Air, Air Force Air, whatever you want to use. Yeah, we could have wiped, any kind of resistance off the map. We could have turned that city into an absolute pile of rubble overnight, but we didn't do it because A, that's a war crime. B, it wouldn't have solved the problem. And so we went with C, which is, go step by step, make sure you find the civilians. If they're in your way, use the you have the moral imperative and also the legal imperative when you can bear that much firepower to not do it, to do it in proportion. You're the major actor in that situation.
And then, as we talk about here a lot, you can add a third component to that. It's militarily effective. Now, obviously, we didn't, quote, win the hearts and minds of the people, and there's a ton of reasons why that did. But in the tactical situation there, what was the result after that 9 months in Ramadi? What was the end game on your tactical operation there?
So the end game was, it was calm. Quite frankly, it was incredibly violent for the first 5 or 6 months, but the more that we continued to press our operations, and we did things like we refined our operations so that we mitigated our own risk. Right, that meant that we would go down main avenues of approach that had visibility for 24/7. We put snipers all over the place. We put little OPs out. We put chains of tiny OPs across the city, and if the insurgents wanted to come fight us, they knew where to find us. Like, we weren't going to go out and, willy-nilly trying to clear blocks without a plan and then catch contact and then have to deal with all the civilians in the middle of it, because the civilians were on our side. Well, through our perspective, were they on our side? Some, but
it's debatable, but I get your point.
Yeah. You heard them, and they're the enemy now.
So now, to your knowledge, because there's no operation on the planet around civilians that can be cost-free. So there's always going to be genuine collateral damage. Do you have any recollection of the total number of civilians that you know of that were killed in the crossfire by whatever means at the end?
I don't know. But at the same time, from my little first-person view, very few. We'd have civilians who would come to our aid stations on occasion when they were hurt by a firefight, or if some were killed. But very, 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 very rarely, when hostilities popped off, were they directly in our line of sight. Because if we, for instance, there is a place called the Souk, in the middle of Ramadi, which is very densely civilian. It was a market, and if there were too many civilians in the area, then we would just kind of have to take the incoming and find a way to get away.
Now, I want to bring up another point here from somebody else who was a veteran of Ramadi, who also has a very interesting viewpoint. This guy's Jocko Willick, who's got a podcast. He's a vet of the Ramadi battle. And he went on not long ago on a Breaking Points podcast of also episode of his. And he had a very interesting take on what he would do if he were the, quote, emperor in Israel fighting this same fight.
If I was emperor of Israel right now, we would be annihilating on the information operations. We would be doing humanitarian missions. Again, going to the emperor position, I would not be super excited to roll in there and start hunting for Hamas with my troops. I'm going to take a lot of casualties. I'm going to take a ton of, you want to start talking about clearing, what do they say? 300 miles of tunnels is what's down there? 300 miles of tunnels. 300 miles of tunnels. This to me turns into siege warfare. And I start doing siege warfare with this overarching idea of benevolence to take care of the civilian populace and show them that we will help. We are here. we want to figure out a peaceful solution to this. We're going to help you out, and we're going to starve and crush Hamas. And oh, you don't want to get starved and crushed? Cool. Come to this location at this time. And I know it sucks, but that is how you actually get the other side to see your perspective a little bit as well.
That's one thing that is 100% absent and lacking of the Israeli even attempt, is to get them to see their side. They're not even attempting it. And as I've argued almost from the outset of this, that Israel is creating far more enemies for itself than it's ever taking off the field, and however many genuine Hamas fighters are actually killed. Because look, you've seen it firsthand, especially in Iraq more than anybody else. When you inadvertently kill a civilian person, their family members, especially their male family members, even if they didn't even like Al-Qaeda in Iraq or the insurgency or whoever, they're now going to be against you. They're not going to say, well, it was Al-Qaeda's fault, and even though it was an American bomb, bless their heart, they tried. No one's going to say that. You're going to create more enemies. Did you actually observe that at any point during your tour?
I absolutely. A lot of the things that Jocko is talking about there were stuff that we did in the Marine Corps. I'm sure he did a lot of the same things, but a huge component of what we did were civilian missions. Where one night we would drag or escort a whole bunch of rice up to a local mosque and give it to an imam so that he could distribute it to his people, or whether it was providing security for locals to rebuild infrastructure that had been blown up. Bank runs for cash. I mean, like, we were kind of an intermediary. Yeah, an intermediary doing everything we could to make the civilians' lives easier, and also to try and endear them to us. On the flip side, when you do go willy-nilly, like if you have a unit that ends up, kicking in the wrong door, you don't have to hurt them. Like, if you go and you humiliate, a local, no one is going to take your side. You're not from there. I mean, imagine if, I don't know, let's say a bunch of Swedish, like, for lack of a better term, roll into rural West Virginia, and humiliate a town like the military. What do you think is going to happen? You're going to have every military-aged male in the region aching to defend the honor, of their family, and of their country. It's just natural.
Yeah. There just is. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be much in an attempt on that. And I just fear that Israel is building insecurity for itself. And look, we all get it. 9/11 happened to us. We understand about wanting to get the perpetrators of that. And I don't know anyone that says Israel shouldn't have gone after Hamas. It was what they did to their civil population, a concert, for crying out loud, the civilians. I mean, they deserve to be hunted down and punished. Absolutely. But not the innocent Palestinians. And if your objective is actually peace, that's the absolute worst way to go about attempting to get it, because all you're doing is building insecurity for the future. In the last few minutes we have here, though, I want to change course a little bit.
Sure.
And kind of ask your conceptual ideas of, what do you think the United States should be in general terms about their foreign policy focus? If we want to avoid unnecessary wars, if we want to not have to fight battles we don't need to, especially in this now super chaotic, volatile Middle East. I want to ask you some of the things that you think that we should do, like maybe your top 3 things if you could talk to the president. But you're going to have to contrast that, I'm afraid, with what our current foreign policy is. And I'm just going to show you 2 really examples, kind of common examples of where we are on our so-called foreign policy elite in America, starting at the top.
Okay.
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world.
So we're so powerful, I think we can do anything we want to. And then you have from the Senate side, man, he can speak for himself here.
Without Iran, there are no Houthis. The Houthis are completely backed by Iran. I've been saying for 6 months now, hit Iran. They have oil fields out in the open. They have the Revolutionary Guard headquarters you can see from space. Blow it off the map.
So let me ask you a question specifically on that, and then kind of take it from there. You've been in the Middle East. You fought wars there, so you studied the region a little bit. If we go in and blow Iran off the map and hit them hard like that, or punch them, as Nikki Haley likes to talk about, is Iran going to go, oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, we'll back off, and then we'll bring peace? Is that going to work?
Well, first of all, Dan, to go to Senator Graham's clip there, I'm not sure what a Houthi is, but I think I don't know.
Is that like Hooters? I mean, is he talking about the wings? Because I didn't understand that.
Yeah, maybe Houthi and the Blowfish back together. Who knows? But to your point with Iran, they're just like absolutely not. If we first of all, attempting to, in my opinion here, Iran has gone, they've invested a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resources into A2AD type defenses, anti-aircraft systems, missiles, the rest of it. So they're not an easy target. Even if we went in and pummeled them into the dirt, managed to do that with air power, they're not going to quit. They're not going to quit. And if you do that, you are inflaming the entire region, particularly right now. And the real prospect is that you would draw China and Russia into a conflict. At a minimum, you would have literally every militia we've been training across the region for the past 20 years rising up against us. It's already happening in Iraq right now.
We've already seen some of that.
Yeah, it was yesterday. We killed a PMU leader. And the media loves to say that, that's an Iranian-backed militia. Well, and at some point they were, because the Iranians stood side by side with them when they were clearing Mosul. And they do have control. However, the bigger point is that those militias are part of the Iraqi government and military, and they have political sway.
Well, right. I don't know if you saw, but right before we came on the air this morning, I saw there was a new report of a leader that was assassinated, for lack of a better term, in Baghdad, that we took out because we said that he was responsible for some of these things. But I mean, that the Iraqi government got really upset the last time we struck a target, and I haven't seen their reaction yet. But it can't be good.
No, it can't, and it can't be good for our long-term prospects. If I had my druthers about it, we would take the few thousand people we have sitting static in places like Iraq and Syria and pull them out. They're just targets. And, call me.
We call that a lot here.
What's that, Dan?
I said, we say that a lot here, specifically about those. I've been on that bandwagon since 2019. Yeah. I've been begging every time I get to go on Fox News or whatever. I've been saying, I back at that time, Trump was still in office. And I said, man, I wish he would make good on his 3 times repeated threat that he was going to remove all the troops from Syria, and was always thwarted by, I think the morass and what they like to call the swamp in DC and the Pentagon. And he was never able to do it.
Right. And that's unfortunate. He was, I happened to be sitting in a Senate hearing with former Ambassador Jeffrey, where he came in and just straight lied about the U.S. troop presence, saying that, and this was, kind of anecdotal story. But I had Senator Paul all teed up to really take this guy on about the U.S. troop presence there. And the first thing that came out of Ambassador Jeffrey's mouth was that there were no U.S. troops in Syria. Turns out turns out a couple years later, he admitted to lying. I believe it was in Defense One, and was proud of it. He was proud because, he didn't think that the president of the United States should have his own policy, and that it was better for the interests, of America for us to remain there. And there we still are. And quite frankly, I maybe get your take on this, but, at this point, I feel like the troop numbers we have in the Middle East, it's bait. Some people.
The word we've used, a strategic vulnerability, is the term that I keep going back to, but it's the same thing. It's just bait, and it's just unfortunate. I tell you what, man, I wish we could keep going on here. I could talk to you another hour here. We're definitely need to have you back, because this is really kind of opening up a whole new window of things that we need to talk about. And I'd love to have you back on and go into some deep, maybe even region by region, of things that you think that we should do, things that would make sense for America, that would actually keep us safe, would actually improve our national defense capacity, and lower the risk that we get sucked into an unexpected war, which I fear we're drifting into right now. But listen, Jim, thank you so much for coming on. We so respect and admire your service to our country, both in uniform and out, and in currently what you're doing right now. And we wish you nothing but success, and truly look forward to having you back on our show very soon.
Dan, pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you again.
Cool. Thank you very much. And for all you out there, as always, we are unintimidated and uncompromised on bringing you the truth, no matter what it is, so that you know and can make sense of the world around you and hold our leaders' feet to the fire so they can't claim that they didn't know in the future. We ask you to join us this afternoon about 3:30 p.m. We're going to have our show favorite Matt Ho and Daniel O'Brien from the program on government oversight. We're going to talk to you not just about the military-industrial complex. A lot of people know that, just use that as a bad word. We're going to show you how there is some genuine risk to our country that poses that we need to get some things fixed. It's not just the money that goes in the budget, it's how it's used. And join us at 3:30 p.m. for that. You will not want to miss that one. In the meantime, we will see you next time. Daniel Davis Deep Dive.